And meetings between Russia and Turkey have gone on as scheduled despite the assassination of Moscow's ambassador to Turkey. Warning, the video that you're about to see may be hard to watch as Ambassador Andrei Karlov was shot and killed while giving a speech at a photo gallery in Turkey by a Turkish policeman. The gunman was later killed in a shootout, though officials believe he didn't act alone. Now, the presidents of both Russia and Turkey say that the killing was a provocation and agreed that it only makes them more determined to stop terrorism in the region. Now, hours after the assassination, shots were also fired outside the U.S. Embassy in Ankara. A suspect has been taken into custody in the Turkish capital, and the embassy is closed today as a precaution. For more, though, on the fallout here of the killing of the Russian ambassador, we turn to former CBS News Moscow bureau chief Beth Knobel. Beth, thanks so much for being here. First, the context of what this means against this greater backdrop of a very tenuous relationship between Russia and Turkey is what?
Well, Turkey and Russia have actually had very good relationship for quite a long time. It goes back to almost the beginning of the Soviet Union, when they have been close partners. Certainly after the Soviet Union fell apart almost 25 years ago to the day, the Turks were some of the first people to go into newly capitalist Russia and bring in businesses and industry and real estate. There was a little bit of tension a little over a year ago when the Turks shot down a Russian warplane that was in Syria. But that led to some economic sanctions, and Russia stopped flying charter flights into Turkey, which had a huge effect on the Turkish economy, since that was pretty much the #1 location for Russians to go on vacation. But they managed to patch it up in June, and things had actually been on quite an even keel since then. Now, you might look at the relationship and say, hey, aren't these guys on different sides of the Syrian war?
NATO member, non-NATO member, on opposite sides of the war in question.
But it's a little bit more complicated than that. And the reason is that there are Kurdish people in Syria. And Turkey has had problems with its own Kurdish population for many, many years. It's been battling them very actively since the mid-'80s. And so I think that there's been kind of an understanding that, hey, if Russia, if you help us with the Kurds in Syria and you keep them from creating some kind of an autonomous region that could threaten us, that maybe we're going to give you a little latitude to operate in Syria.
So what did you make the initial response from both countries that this assassination will in no way derail these talks as they do begin?
Well, I thought that was pretty interesting. And another interesting thing I'll share is that when I was watching the Russian news this morning, New York time, I noticed that I did not see Vladimir Putin on the news. Now, he has said something, but I didn't see it. They didn't show him. That is Russian TV talk for let's de-escalate this whole thing. Let's just keep this whole thing calm. So I believe that they do, and the fact that this meeting went on shows it, and the fact that both sides are saying, look, you know, we have lots of interests in common. You know, this is not going to derail us. I think they really seem to mean that.
We also have learned that Russia, though, has vowed to work with not just Turkey, but also Iran as they look to negotiate a peace deal in Syria, which some will see as disingenuousness of the highest form. What do you make of the attempt to work out that agreement now?
Well, I think you have to look at it in historical context, that there have been peace efforts going on in Syria since 2011. And the UN has been involved, the Arab League has given it a try, sort of every major power around the world has been involved, and they have gone nowhere, very sadly for the people of Syria. So if you look at this, you can sort of say, you know, this is sort of an interesting group. Turkey and Russia and Iran, where's the United States? So I'm not exactly sure if this is saying, hey, U.S., we don't really need you in here, or they're saying we trust Turkey to actually represent U.S. interests in here because Turkey is a very trusted NATO member. We
had Holly Williams on, though, who was in Turkey for us, who also pointed out that many have seen Russian support of Bashar al-Assad as being simply a way for it to enter the global power scene again. Could it not then be seen as the Russians having decided we've gotten what we needed?
Well, absolutely.
Aleppo has fallen, and it's time to try to get back to the right side of history here?
Well, I mean, certainly they if you're looking at it from the Russian point of view, they would probably say that their incursion into Syria has been incredibly successful. They have gotten lots of what they want, and most important to them, I think, is that they are seen as a player on the world stage. One of the things that Putin has been all about since I started covering him in 1999, when he was the prime minister of Russia under Boris Yeltsin, was that he has complained that Russia is not getting its due from the world community, that it is a key world power and that it needs to be respected as such. And so if you look at what's happened over the years, Putin has done very many things in terms of his foreign policy, in terms of hosting an Olympics, to say, you know, we're just as good as anybody else. We are the second world superpower along with the United States. And so what's happened in Syria is part of that. Now, is he ready to go? I don't, leave Syria? I don't know. One of the things that tends to make countries pull out of a war is that people at home start complaining. Well, that's not really happening in Russia. Putin still has huge support. He has near total control of television. So I don't see a lot of anti-war protests going on in Russia. So, and the other wild card is we have a new president coming in, and it's really not clear what his foreign policy is going to be in terms of dealing with Putin. I personally cannot wait for the first time that those two men actually get to meet and talk to each other. I think we're going to have to see, but just historically, there's not a lot of reason to think that a peace deal is going to happen.
Beth Knobel, really appreciate it. Thanks for the time.
Thanks, Josh.